On behalf of the entire college, I extend a hearty welcome to you, sir. I now request Mr. Amar Kumar Pandey to kindly take over the session.
Anyway, by the time they set right the technology, let me thank all of you, and particularly the chairperson of Sahyadri College. And I would like to extend my heartiest compliments to him and all of you for having achieved an impossible conclave. To get our Indian scientists only is so difficult, but this college has done the impossible by inviting 3 Nobel Laureates, 100 top speakers from across the world, which includes me too, and really brought a great semblance of highest form of excellence in imparting knowledge and skill to its student. You can't expect better than this. Even the IITs and the IIMs don't get this opportunity, and I'm sure you all must be enjoying it and must be making best use of the facilities that has been brought before you. And my special thanks to Bhaviji, Mrs. Bandari, that she, of all the sessions, there are 8 sessions going on, but she was kind and gracious enough to attend my session, so I feel specially privileged. So dear friends, the subject of today has been made a lot easier by the person who introduced me by explaining what is complexities. So I hope you have understood primitives, complex, compounds, and combinations of primitives. So basically, when we deal in a subject like management, what are the primitives that you can think of? She used a word primitive. So what are the primitives you can think of? Suppose you're studying your first year, second year. All of you are first year or only first year? MBA. So you're already a graduate, so you know quite a lot, more than the parents. So what do you think are the primitives which you have to deal as you come into the field of management? What are the primitives? I'll give you 100 rupees cash reward if you give me one primitive. Anybody? Okay. So, no, it's nothing to, it's even I didn't know it a few years back. And then with learning, you acquire a bit of knowledge and skill. So primitives are those factors or those variables. You understand variables? What is a variable? Which is not a constant. And what is a constant? Which doesn't change with time, location, weather, or anything. If infinity is there, it's a constant, so infinity is a constant, and it remains infinity and remains a constant. So when you study law of gravity, have you studied law of gravity? So earlier, before Newton developed law of gravity, the apples used to fly up in the sky. Is that true? They were falling still, isn't it? So he coined a word called gravitational constant, which is represented by G. So it is the pull of the earth on any object, which remains the same irrespective of the size, volume, content, whatever it is. And then it's a function of mass as well as the distance from the ground to the object, the square of that. So anyway, that's law of gravity. So in law of gravity, the mass is, what is mass? It's a variable, isn't it? And what is constant? The G is a constant. So the gravitational pull will depend upon the mass of the objects upon which it is operating and the distance between the two objects, square of that, divided by that. So similarly in enterprise also, you have constants and you have variables. So these variables, they are called primitives. Is this clear? Did you know it when you said primitives? Okay. So as a student, you must have an inquisitive mind as to the word that you have read and you have read and internalized the word. But at the same time, you must make an effort to understand what that word means so that it helps you understand the next paragraph of the subject. So, variables can be multiple, but primarily it is within variables, the primitive is something which cannot be further subdivided. So it's like a subatomic particle, but with the evolution of science, as we all know that there's an infinite number of divisibility. First they thought atom is indivisible, then they found further constituents of the atoms. What are the constituents of atoms? Then they thought these electrons are indivisible or protons are indivisible. Then further they found that they also constituted by, what is the next level? Quarks, isn't it? Then quarks also, they further went into the spin of something. Then they finally found that every matter is an antimatter. And so finally science has really raised up its hand and says that we don't know. Something divides further, but we are unable to explain that. And that's why they land into what we call that Switzerland University of Bern. There's a Center for Theoretical Physics, CERN it's called. It's known by the name CERN. And they try to find out what is it called? God's particle. You heard of God's particle? So they said that there's something which we can't define, but it's something like bosons, or which Einstein and one of the Indian scientists studied about. They call it bosons. And then these bosons were somewhere close to, they call the God's particle, which is, they think that it cannot be further divided. So anyway, these are the introduction to the primitives. So even primitives are divisible, but for our purpose in management, we need not go into so detail of science. For us, the time, location, because you have to complete a project. It has to be done in a particular time. It has to be done over a particular location, technology. So these are the primitives items which you have to work with. So I would like to take you through one of my presentations, which is actually, it's also my PhD thesis also. So how this complex system of, you've heard of refugees, is it? You know what refugees mean. What is a refugee? One person? No problem. Whatever you think is a refugee. So a refugee is a person who's displaced out of his situation because of reasons and factors which endanger his life and liberty. Is that clear? I'm taking you to social science, which is so different from what you have been taught about products and product management and motivation and leadership and so many other things. But you'll find that all of this comes into this thesis which I presented before National Law School, and how the complex system of refugee management has been kind of a complex system has been understood, and I have tried to propose a solution for a problem which they thought was worthy of a PhD. So this was an experience which was pertaining to two places where I served as United Nations peacekeeper. One is Bosnia-Herzegovina. Where is Bosnia? USA. So just to tell you that all countries are not in USA. There are countries other than USA and UK also. I know all of you want to be in USA and UK, but there are other countries also. It's a part of former Yugoslavia. Have you heard of Yugoslavia? It broke up much before you were perhaps born. So all of you are born after 95. So you would know these countries are Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia and all that. But before that it was one country like India, and it was a very big country and powerful country in Europe. So Bosnia is one country which was under a lot of problems, and there were a lot of civil strife. And similarly another country in West Africa, which is Sierra Leone. So I know all the girls in this class would have heard of diamonds. And most of you must be desirous of having at least one piece of diamonds, isn't it? And whereas most of the diamonds of the world is produced, that's the country Sierra Leone. So world's maximum diamond reserve was in Sierra Leone, which was supposed to be the asset and resource of that country because it is so much plenty, but it became the biggest scourge, and it became the biggest curse of that country because for that diamond only, the country had to suffer tremendously. So I leave it to you to Google and learn from, some other sources as to what the problems these countries faced. Vijay Kumar was my guide, who's ex-vice chancellor of National Law University of Tamil Nadu. It doesn't move. Is it too far or something? Okay, you'll do it there. So these are the various, okay, before this, I'll tell you, actually you must stop me if you think that I've skipped certain subjects, because for me it must be the 10th or 12th presentation. So and keeping your academic excellence in mind, sometimes I may tend to slip. So in case you don't understand, you must raise your hand and ask me. I would love to clarify those points in case I am hurrying too fast. So this is the structure of the thesis, which is a complex system study. And the next one. Yeah, this picture, you are familiar? You must have seen it in newspaper and magazines. This is a boy from, the family was moving away from Syria because Syria saw a lot of war. You know that ISIS attacked Syria, certain parts of Syria, Iraq and all, and they had captured almost Iraq. You heard of ISIS? Yeah, it's a brotherhood friendly organization, isn't it? It's the organization of the terrorists who wanted to capture Iraq and establish a certain type of rules which are not conducive to the modern system of developing democracies and things like that. So they were more theological society they wanted to create, and in the process a large number of people with similar mindset, they attacked Iraq, Syria and some other countries. So this was a boy escaping from Syria into Europe, and with his family. The family had just abandoned the child because he was dead and there was no point carrying, and they had no money or no resources to even meet his final rites. So it's a very touching picture entering into Turkey. A Turkish police officer is doing. So does this explain something? This picture? It's a very heart-rendering picture, which says that what is the status of a refugee? I'll define refugee, what it means in terms of law and international law. Yeah, next. So research is around this general broad guidelines. So does it look simple or complex to you? This whole picture, does it look complex or simple? Looks like a textbook or something? It looks like a textbook. A textbook is very complex, you know that, because you have to study before the examination to score marks. So this is something like that. So it's again a complex system which is presented before you. It has various aspects. One is that, okay, so before I move to the next slide, I'll explain the term called return. So when there is a war or there is a situation when a large number of population is displaced from its country of habitual residence, where they usually live, and they're forced to migrate to another country. So then they are called refugee, and the process is called refugee displacement of people, okay? So the country which was supposed to protect its own people, like we are all here today, and I'm a cop, and I'm given the responsibility like police commissioner of Bangalore to protect all of you. So suppose police commissioner refuses to protect all of you, what will happen to you? None of you are safe. Then what do you think? What is the first thought which comes to mind? Enough of Bangalore, let me go to Bangalore. Suppose Bangalore also refuses. They'll say, Achha, let me go to Hyderabad. Hyderabad refuses, Delhi. Delhi refuses. Then you have no choice but to think of going across the 7 seas, and then you become a refugee. So the moment you cross the border of a country for fear of life and liberty, or perception of threat to your life and liberty, then those kind of movements are called refugee movements. So when refugees are moved to another country, the other country under UN Convention is supposed to provide some protection. So they are protected by the other nation under international obligations. But other country, how long can they keep you? So they don't want to keep you for too long. Have you heard of Rohingyas? All of you? What happened with Rohingyas when they fled from Burma? That was an easy system, isn't it? The simple system. Rohingyas were displaced and they were at the border of India and wanted to enter India. What was India's response? Anyone? They were not allowed inside the country. Then what was proposed by India? Send them back, return. So they landed again in Bangladesh. After a few days, Bangladesh and Myanmar, they enter into an agreement. And what was this agreement for? The agreement was that 10 lakh Rohingyas, they are staying in Bangladesh as refugees and they have to be returned back to Myanmar. So that is what they signed the agreement about. So return is inevitable. Can you go and stay in somebody else's house for an unlimited period of time? Suppose your friend is there, you are in trouble, he welcomes you when you come there at the doorstep. And he provides you shelter, food, clothing, everything. But can he keep you for eternity? What will he expect from you? Arey Baba, kab jaoge? So it's like that. So the countries also behave in the same way, and they have this agreements of return. So there is a proposition of law of return of refugees in international law under international conventions, which I will be sharing with you. So same thing happened with Rohingyas also, and same thing happens with all the refugees across the world. So that is how I have tried to encapsulate as to what is the history of return, how the whole process started, and return through international law, and why return is considered as the primary solution. So you have a problem in hand, so what do you think of? You think of a solution when there is a problem, and every problem has a solution as you believe in. So under the international law, it is considered to be, if there is a choice between keeping you for eternity in somebody else's house, or there is a choice to send you back home, then what the international community prefers? They prefer to send you back. So this is the primacy of international law, where return is the primary solution and proposed solution. Then how it is supported internationally, which is again a very complex problem. Why should another third country, fourth country, fifth country, or UK should be interested in refugees of Myanmar? So how the whole institutional support system also prefers the return. So other countries also prefer return, and in some way they are all interconnected. So we'll be seeing in diagrams and graphics as we move. Then return as a duty, whether it's a duty to return, suppose you have come into somebody else's house, and unless until he forces you out, you don't want to go out. Is that right? So you also have to find ways to return. So that becomes your duty also, not to remain a guest. Don't become a pest for your host. So that's something applies in international law also. Of course, UN and challenges and all that is there. As we move, we'll move further. This is just to introduce to a subject to you. So first one is explained to you, born out of compulsions, post-World War I. Does it make sense that these are complex things we are talking about? Or they look just sentences to you? Anybody finds it very simple? World War I. All the countries fought for about 4 or 5 years. If the two neighbors fight for half an hour, it's such a chaos. If the whole world is fighting with each other for 4 to 5 years, what kind of chaos that must be, isn't it? So these are all we are talking of complex systems. Then the first guy who was also a Nobel laureate, he was given Nobel Prize, Fridtjof Nansen, in 1922, the Russian people, the Russian Jews, they were pushed out of their country by the army of the Tsar. So they were all brought to the border of Poland, and you know Russia, it's a very cold country, and at the border the temperature will go down as much as minus 30, minus 40 degree. So the refugees were pushed into border areas and they were not allowed to come in. So League of Nations together, all the countries together, 192 countries together then in 1922, they all came together and they appointed Fridtjof Nansen, who was a scientist, a mathematician, explorer, and he was a very versatile guy. So he was appointed, he was from Norway. So he was appointed as the High Commissioner for Russian refugees in 1922. So he first time proposed that refugees can't be resettled into other countries and they have to return to Russia back. So he negotiated the return of Russian refugees back to Russia, and he's one of the highly acclaimed humanitarianist who was honored with Nobel Prize, and later his organization was also honored with a Nobel Prize. So then on the right column, third column, you have these are the institutions which were over the period constituted. 1922 League of Nations, Russian refugee. Then earlier what happened that whenever, see this is a world situation. So whole world was at war with each other. And there was a concept called population homogenization. So uniformity of ethnic groups. So if there are Russians are there, so no Polish can stay in Russia. Or if Germans are there, so no Hungarians can stay in Germany. So something like that. It was a very funny kind of a time period when everybody wanted to have a purity of race. And this was all induced by some vague concept of, purity and impurity of races and all that, where which reflections of which we see in parts and, even modern time we see all that. So because of that, there was a lot of mass scale population. And this also became the background for partition of India. What was the reason for partition of India? Sorry? Religion. So India was divided along the community's identity based on religion. Because Muslim League, the party then, they said that we cannot have peaceful coexistence. The two groups can't live peacefully, so let us have another country, let them have another country, and let's live in peace. So this became the reason for India-Pakistan partition also in 1947, which you know that it was the largest displacement of mankind ever recorded in history. So large number of people. So we are also refugees in some way. So this topic connects to all of us. Then subsequently, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 1948, they introduced an article called Article 13. So under Article 13, anybody can leave any place and come back to the same place. So everybody has a fundamental freedom of movement to go to any place and come back to any place. Later, it was further improved by UNHCR 1950. United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Article 33, said also reconfirmed that anybody can go anywhere and the refugees can also return to their country. Next, please. Does it make sense to you? Does it sound management? Does it sound management? Not what you have studied so far, but this is human management, not human resource management. This is human management. So try to relate that because it's a new subject. What happens as you grow in post-graduation level and beyond post-graduation level, the subjects and the learning becomes a lot of intercoordinated subject. So it is not just that what you learn from business and selling soaps and toothpaste and whatever and human resource and marketing and sales, but you also have to draw upon the knowledge which is drawn from various other areas of management, and this is giving you an exposure in that area. So now it makes sense to you? Backbenchers. All of you are very busy there. I hope it's making notes from this. Okay. So, what are the legal regimes? Can you work without law in management? You need law. And law defines the parameters within which you have to work or you have to accomplish your task. You do the same thing under company law, labor law, this law, that law, so many laws are there. How many laws are there which you deal with? Can you anyone tell me that management expert has to deal with how many laws, say in marketing? You have made a list of it? So I'll request your professor to give you a task that each branch of management, how many legal regimes that you have to deal with, you must enlist that because tomorrow you have to deal with that, isn't it? Can you escape it? You cannot. So similarly, in human management, you have various legal regimes which operate upon you and which you cannot transgress. The moment you transgress, you become a criminal, not of property offenses, not of body offenses, but you become a criminal of criminality against humanity. So you become a criminal of humanity. So that is the concept we have in international laws. So in 1951, pertaining to the subject of refugees, one law was brought in. That was Convention on the Status of Refugees and Stateless Person. Have you heard of stateless person? Can you imagine somebody can be without a state? Somebody can be a citizen of nowhere. Have you heard of anybody? Huh? Do you know of anyone or you have heard of anyone who's citizen of nowhere? Oh, they are citizens of China. Of course, they don't admit and we also don't admit, but China says they are their citizen. See, Rohingyas are stateless persons. In 1950, the Citizenship Act of Myanmar defined the citizenship in such a manner which excluded a large number of Rohingyas, and they were considered as immigrants from Bangladesh much before partition of India. So they are actually Indian fellows who landed in Myanmar and who were denied citizenship, and neither India gives them citizenship nor Bangladesh gives them citizenship, no country gives them citizenship, and Myanmar, where they have stayed for generations, for hundreds of years, also did not give them citizenship. So they become stateless persons. So there is a law to deal with them. There's 1951 convention, and subsequently in 1963, another convention came into existence, which is called Convention on Status of Stateless Persons. So anyway, so there, under Article 1C, 5 and 6, who are the refugees? They are defined, and there are certain protocols. Then